a weird angle tonight, aren't we? Weird time, weird angle. It's all good. Oh, let's put this hair back. Happy Wednesday, friends. Oh, look. Facebook finally puts my comments in the right direction. Go Facebook. Hopefully I've got everything done correctly. I am excited for you to join me for Facebook tonight. For Bible study tonight here on Facebook. I changed out of my elf stuff. Only to put the sweater on because I was still cold. Because I'm just not used to being outside. And then being outside in the cold. But I feel very cozy. So I'm glad you're here. I hope that your week is going well. I hope that you are preparing your heart for Christmas. But if you're here tonight, maybe you're here because you feel overwhelmed, or you've been doing over max out because you feel anxious, or you're like me and many other people where you're just like, I feel like I am running on empty. Anybody else feel that way? And so, we've been spending the last few weeks looking at stories from the Old Testament where people were at the ends of their ropes, where they had hit their limits, and then comparing it to stories of Jesus in the New Testament on Wednesday nights. So, I'm glad you're here. I hope I went live in the tribe like I was supposed to. I think I did. I also have my Sonic cup after we left post. We hadn't had dinner, so I had to sling through Sonic and got me a cherry limeade. And I'm going to be running on this sugar to do Bible study. But I apologize for being late. We were giving out those gifts, and seeing kids' eyes light up for presents, especially presents they didn't know they were getting or expecting, and good ones at that. You can just feel the Christmas magic and the Christmas spirit. So if you're here tonight, say hey, or drop an emoji below. Let me know who I'm talking to. I like to interact if this is your first time joining me live. And if you don't make it all the way through, because I know it's late and you fall asleep, or if you're just popping on because you want to say hey for a second and then you gotta get off, that's okay. As soon as I get off here, I will actually take this one down and I'm going to put it over on YouTube, and then you're able to watch it over there. And for those who have YouTube Premium, you can even download it. So it just works out really nicely. So I generally am excited about tonight in this word because it's a story that I feel like we've read before, but we put the emphasis somewhere else. And I believe that when you read stories in the Bible in different seasons of your life, they just hit different. So I hope that tonight that this story from the Bible about Jesus performing miracles opens your eyes or reminds you just of a few things that are important, especially for those of us who may need a miracle, may feel like things have another way to go, or maybe you even feel crazy for having faith for things that you're like, that other people are like, you do realize it's the middle of the pandemic. Why are you believing in that? That's not going to happen. Or maybe you have an audacious prayer and that you just really have faith for, and it makes you feel crazy because everyone around you is like, there's no way. Or maybe you're just at the absolute end of your rope and you are already making choices to have to act out of overwhelm or out of desperateness, because you're willing to do anything right now in order for things to change. So I don't know where you're at. I'm glad y'all are catching live. It means a lot to me that you join me live, because like I said, I like the interaction. I like to be able to answer questions or go one-on-one. So it's awesome to me. We are going to be in Mark 5, so if you want to turn there while I open up in prayer. But if you have a prayer request below, you could even just say personal prayer request or private prayer request just say that and put it in the chat. Or if you want to drop it below and you see somebody leave a prayer request and you feel encouraged to, acknowledge it, like it, or reply back to it, it's a way that we can build community and stand together in prayer. So I will open with prayer right now. Lord, thank you for joining me here on Bible study tonight. Thank you for giving me the space and a place to meet with other people, other women who are overwhelmed and anxious and maybe even fearful of the next few weeks or months, but to gather together and read your word and to be in your presence. Lord, we seek peace, we seek wholeness, we seek joy, and we seek renewal. Let tonight be a reminder to our hearts and to our souls and to our minds that nothing is out of reach for you. Lord, we ask these things and we praise your name. And then pray, amen. Well, tonight, as I mentioned, we are going to be in Mark 5. But I want to start out with a question. If you're comfortable enough, drop it below, because I like to read them. But I just want to ask, has anyone ever acted out of being desperate? Or have you ever been so desperate for something you were willing to look absolutely crazy? Maybe you were desperate for an answer. Maybe you were desperate for money. Maybe you were desperate for attention. But maybe you just did something absolutely out of line. And it could not necessarily be a bad way. It could be funny. It could be silly. But have you ever been so desperate, maxed out or bottomed out, that you did something out of the norm, out of the usual? And if you don't want to tell me what it was what it was that you did, just say yes in the chat below. And I'm sure I would think, more than one of us who's done something crazy. Especially if you're a mom, we tend, or I've learned in the last year, we tend to be more willing to do crazy things for the sake of our children. We're willing to make a scene or look absolutely stupid, whatever it is, for our children. Whether that is because they need something or they want something, or it's to just, even embarrass them, maybe. But I think we can all recall a time. So I just want you to think of that. If you're in Mark 5, give me a thumbs up. Let me know you're there. But we're not going to start at verse 1. We're going to start at verse 21. And this is going to be a story about two women, or women and more like a woman and a girl. And we probably have all studied the first part of the story, the first woman, a lot more than the second. And the first is the woman with the issue of blood. But I'm going to try to point out a few things that you might not have caught before or seen. But we're really going to emphasize on the storyline of the daughter, the young girl. We don't even get her name. We actually don't get either one of them's name. But it's in reference to her father's position that we get her name. So I want you to keep that in mind. I'm stretching for just a second. I feel like I need one of those back adjusters. I feel like I'm hunching over. I also feel like when I have papers like this that I'm on the news. So maybe that is a lifelong dream or something I'm fulfilling. Here in verse 21, Jesus crossed the lake again. And on the other side, a large crowd had gathered around him on the shore. Jairus, one of the synagogue leaders, came forward. When he saw Jesus, he fell at the feet, and he pleaded with him. Before we do the pleading, Jairus was a synagogue leader. He worked in the church, in the temple. This is important because in this storyline, we're going to feel as if we are Jairus' daughter, and Jairus is going to be a beautiful example or image of Jesus being the one who pleads on our behalf. So just keep that in mind. But Jairus, being a synagogue leader, he had status. He had title, which means he had access. Not just anyone could have just barged through to the front of the line and be like, Jesus. That's not a thing. So part of this that you want to make note of is who you know can determine the outcome that you get. And I know that you probably know that in other areas of your life. But in this story, who we want to know, of course, is Jesus. But watch how the story of Jairus plays out. Jairus pleads with Jesus, "My daughter is about to die. Please come and place your hands on her so that she can be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A swarm of people were following Jesus, crowding in on him. A woman was there who had been bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a lot under the care of many doctors and had spent everything she had without getting any better. In fact, she had gotten worse. Because she had heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his clothes. I want you to make note that she had exhausted her resources, and she also exhausted man's capabilities. Not only was she at the end of her rope, but she was at the end of technology. She was at the end of knowledge. And so the only possibility was going to be God and be a miracle. Because she had heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his clothes. She was thinking, if I can just touch his clothes, then I'll be healed. Her bleeding stopped immediately. I want you to underline that word, immediately. And then she sensed in her body that her illness had been healed. Also, I want you to underline the word sensed. Now, at this point, she's not said anything to Jesus. She has not said anything to the disciples, not been like, hey, disciples, like, hey, John, Peter, hi, you might be the one that would let me, can I come over and just give a chat to Jesus for a second? I know he's in a hurry, but like, can I talk to him? None of that went down. She just went up and tapped the back of his cloak. And it most likely would have been dirty in the back on the ground. Her bleeding stopped immediately and she felt it. That's an important thing to note. She felt it. Because this is what happened. 30. At that very moment, I also underlined that, Jesus recognized that power had left him and gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "Don't you see this crowd?" They're like, there's hundreds of people. Everybody's touching you. Everybody's bumping into you. We're just trying to get to Jairus' house, but all these crazy fools won't go away. I mean, they were just like out of it. "Don't you see this crowd pressing against you? Yet you ask, who touched me?" They're like, "Me." But Jesus looked around and carefully to see who had done it. Now, make a note here about the disciples. If you're following along with the book here at Maxed Out, then you studied Exodus 16 this week, and you studied the story of when the Israelites are losing their mind. They're upset because they're wandering in the wilderness, and they're basically saying, "Moses, why didn't you just let us die? It would have been better off than having to do this crap. Well, this is just getting ridiculous." They were complaining, they were not trusting, and they're just kind of out of their heads a little bit. And then we have to show a little grace to the disciples because they were exhausted. Remember at the very beginning we read they crossed the lake again. They had just performed, there was just a huge demon possession miracle that just happened. And now we're on the way to Jairus' daughter's house, and then this woman is intervening, and they're also spent. They're in a hurry, and they're ready to be over. They're basically saying, we ain't got time for this. The woman, full of fear and trembling, came forward. Knowing what had happened to her, she fell down in front of Jesus and told him the whole truth. He responded, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace, healed from your disease." Now, one thing I want you to know about this portion of the healings, about the one with the issue of blood, is that it was with a touch, a physical touch, and then it was with a sense, an internal knowing that she had been healed. So many times, sometimes in church, we can get very ritualistic, or we can get a little too practical, or too focused on rules, or did you do this? Did you do that? Did you have your quiet time? Did you not commit any of the sins? Did you not, sin against your parents? Did you kill anybody? Like checking the box. And it can feel a little black and white, a little rigid, a little easy to become rigid and bordered. And so when things are often rigid and bordered, or the law, it sucks the emotion, but also the feeling, the sensory out of it. And I think this is one of the issues that modern Christians have, because we have created so much dogma and rituals around our faith that we have forgotten what it means to sense and feel the presence and power of God. Because at this point, remember, she hasn't said anything. She simply used her faith to touch God, or touch Jesus, which activated a release of his power. It was her faith in literal action that called forth the power of Jesus. He didn't have to pray anything over her. He didn't have to turn around and touch her, but it was her belief in action that healed her. And again, Jesus recognized his power leaving. He felt his power leave, another version says. Felt and feeling. We are meant to be spiritual, holistic beings. That means that we have to understand and read and absorb the word, pray for wisdom and discernment. But we also have to be in tune with our bodies and our soul's capacity to feel and emote the power of God and sense his presence. And that was never taught to me. That was never taught to me as a kid. And then I think as an adolescent, I thought that feeling the presence of God was like something that only happened with the right kind of worship music. Anybody else feel that way? Like you feel like you have to like conjure up God's presence by playing the right worship song, the right level of dim lighting, stillness everywhere else, and no distractions. But it was her posture of faith and her action and complete desperateness that brought forth the power of God. It wasn't a prayer, but it was a posture of belief that healed her. And he even says that. It says that, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. You've been healed from your disease. So I want you to also underline, go in peace. Because we're going to come back to that as we look at Jairus' daughter. 35. While Jesus was still speaking with her, being the one with the issue of blood, messengers came from the synagogue leader's house, saying to Jairus, your daughter has died. Why bother the teacher any longer? Time's up. What's the point anymore? You don't have time for this. You might as well go home and take care of your wife. Be worried about the rest of your family. It just didn't seem necessary anymore. Sorry, you missed your shot. It's kind of what they're saying. But Jesus overheard their report and said to the synagogue leader, don't be afraid. Keep trusting. Kitten nuggets. That'll preach on its own. He didn't allow anyone to follow him except Peter, James, John, and James's brother. They came to the synagogue leader's house, and they saw all the commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. Can you imagine, the emotion of losing your 12-year-old daughter? Just the commotion that was inside of that house. You may have been at a house sometime where someone's passed away, or they just got the news of someone getting sick or an accident. So you can sense what that's like. Jesus went in and said to them, what is all this commotion and crying about? The child isn't dead. She's only sleeping. And at that point, I think I'd be like, no, like, who are you to say that? She obviously is dead. Like, don't be playing with my feelings at this point, Lord. Like, where were you 15 minutes ago? Which, if I was Jairus' wife, I would be throwing hands. You know, like, you should have been here an hour ago. If you had done what you said you were going to do, then my daughter would still be alive. Like, that would be my mentality. And so, I think Jesus is trying to, like, cut them. Like, what are you even talking about? No, she ain't dead because I ain't said she's dead. At 40, they laughed at him. The commotion, the family, all the people that probably been around as the daughter had taken her last breath. They're like, you're a fool. Like, we watched her die. But they threw them all out. Then, taking the child's parents and his disciples with him, he went to the room where the child was, taking her hand. And he said to her, Talitha cum, which means, young woman, get up. Now, before I emphasize that in just a second, I want you to note and just write a note about the fact that Jesus carefully picked the right people to come in the room. He didn't these aren't the people I'm sure that were laughing. That was probably the crowd that had gathered. Because the parents, you don't laugh about it regardless. There's nothing even funny or remotely sarcastic about it that is good. But Jesus grabbed the parents because I'm sure they were absolutely just, heartbroken. Their 12-year-old daughter is lying dead in the other room. And he grabs his disciples. Now, why would he grab his disciples? Because there's going to be, the next generation of preachers, apostles, missionaries, and it's their job to witness the miracle. There was nobody at this point, flying around creating, books to sell every week about what Jesus was doing. A lot of it was oral, so he needed those witnesses. We talk a lot about witnesses in the Bible and the role of witnesses in miracle so that they can go and tell. But he took her hand, the young girl's hand, just 12 years old, who had just died, and said to her, Talitha cum, which means, young woman, get up. Please underline, young woman, get up. Suddenly, underline that word again, the young woman got up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. They were shocked. He gave them strict orders that no one should know about what happened. Then he told them to give her something to eat. One of the first stories of Maxed Out, I had everyone to read about Elijah when he needed a snack and a nap. And we're ending on this last week with Jesus saying, get up and let her eat. And so I had you underline a few things, and I want to draw them together as I kind of go over the points, the things that I want you to take home as maybe you're feeling the same way, as that you're so done and overwhelmed that maybe you are like Jairus and you're using your position of power or title to help you do what you can for your family. Or maybe you're like the woman with the issue of blood, and that you're just believing so big that if you can just get close enough to Jesus, you know that he will heal you. But maybe you're also someone that's in the crowd. Maybe you're not either Jairus or the daughter. Maybe you're not the one with the issue of blood. Maybe you're one of the cacklers in the crowd. You want to see who this Jesus is, what everybody's talking about. You believe he's who he says he is, but you want to see for yourself. You're looking for proof. You're looking for, what the biggest hype thing is right now. Or maybe you're a disciple where your faith and your walk with Christ, for them literally and your figuratively, is kind of becoming exhausting or old hat. Or you already feel like you know what the answer is going to be, so why even ask? It feels kind of worn, kind of old. Your faith feels kind of exhausted in a way, where the disciples were getting quick with Jesus, like, why do you even care? What difference does it make? What are you going to do? She's already dead. like the Israelites were saying, what is this manna? And then they were disobeying and trying to do what they could for themselves, because though their faith had gotten them where they were a little worried that their faith couldn't take them the rest of the way. So I don't know who you are in this story, but I want you to look at a few things that are attributes of those who believed and that of Jesus. So one of the first things that I had you underline was the words immediately in verse 29, then at that very moment in 30, and then in 42 the words suddenly. What do those all mean? Answer in the chat. What do they have in common? It all means right now. Not waiting. There's not a 3-day wait period. There's not a pray about it, see what happens. Right now. One of the phrases that we used to say through our adoption process, and then I said while Zadie was at the hospital, was that there only takes one right thing. I don't need 100 miracles. I just need the right one. We didn't need 100 adoption profiles to go through. We just needed the right one. Because we know that when the right things are in the right place, God and Jesus work right now. The miracle was suddenly. It wasn't a slow slide into the miracle. Sometimes the miracles can happen immediately. She went from dead to life. It was black and then it was white. She went from bleeding for 12 years to not at all. And I think sometimes we take this posture of tiptoeing in and out of our faith. We're like believing for a miracle in like small ways, and then we get bigger. But then we get a little nervous and then we way back. Because what if it doesn't happen? We're scared of disappointment. We're scared of heartache. We're scared of the failure. But when you're desperate, and you just need the chain to break, you need the fear and the pain to fall off. When you can't walk another step, you will lean into crazy faith and act on that desperateness. You will use your title, even though you would never want to, especially as a synagogue leader. You will push through a crowd just to touch the hem of the garment. As a woman, that would have been a huge no back then. But Jesus has room for his daughters. Jesus makes room for his daughters. When everyone says you don't have time, you have to go to Jairus' house, they wouldn't even mention what was happening, just Jairus, because it was more important to make Jairus, an important man, happy than it was to heal the daughter. So Jesus was making a point when he stopped everything for a woman. A woman that was probably known for having issues. A woman who was downright poor and disenfranchised. But she was desperate. Because Jesus can do something with our desperateness. He knows that that gap between what we have and what we need is the perfect place for him to show up immediately. But we have to believe for that immediateness. We have to believe and have faith that it can happen. Because he says in the next two words I had you underlined that correlate together was the word faith, and the phrase your faith has healed you. And then when he says to Jairus and everyone, keep trusting, faith and trust lead to a miracle, lead to healing. Your faith and trust will summon the power of God. But you see, it is an active faith. It is a faith that runs towards Jesus, not a faith that waits on Jesus. Both of these people came and said, hey, it's me. I need you. They didn't sit and Jairus wasn't just sitting at the synagogue, just praying at the synagogue. Lord, please let Jesus come here today. Lord, let Jesus come sit right beside me. Then I'll take him to my house. He ran out of the church, left the synagogue, and went to find Jesus. The miracle that you might be waiting for may cause you to have to move. And I'm not saying necessarily physically, but to look and meet Jesus in a different place. And then also your miracle is going to challenge you to go and to move. And move in a physical sense, because the other word combination I had you to underline is go in peace in verse 34. And then in verse 43, and also 41, he says, young woman, get up. Get up, and then go in peace. Jesus delivers the miracle and then challenges you to take that miracle on a mission. You're now a steward of that miracle, and so are those who witnessed it, to tell about it. Because people will know that when you tell the story of death to life, that is powerful, and they'll say, who is this Jesus? Who is this man? Tell me more about him. When you talk to doctors, everyone who saw this one who had been bleeding for 12 years suddenly stopped. People say, who is this Jesus? Who is this man? And it expands their faith to believe. And so you have to take that miracle on a mission. And I truly believe and just feel it in my heart that Jesus knew that both Jairus and his family and this woman could be trusted with such a miracle. And so if you're in a desperate place, if you're at the bottom of your well, if you are like Jairus, or you're the woman with the issue of blood, or you just don't even know which way is up, you're in a prime position for a miracle, because you probably are getting to the point where you don't care what people think anymore. And you're willing to stand in crazy faith. You're willing to move in crazy faith. You're willing to push through a crowd and just touch the hem of his garment when everyone is just waiting for him to get to the synagogue. So it might not be in a church. It might not be the way you expected it. It might be after the bill came or after the deadline passed. But God can do so much more than we could ask or imagine. Jesus' power and God's might and glory is no match for 12 years worth of doctors or technology. But it was her persistence and insistence and faith and diligence to belief that allowed the power to be used through her. So belief and trust will lead you to miracles. And then Jesus is going to expect you to move with those miracles. You got to get up. Girl, you got to get up and move. Maybe you're moving towards the miracle. Maybe that's the move you've got to make. Or maybe Jesus just entrusted you the miracle. You know, that's how I felt coming through the story with Zadie, is that we've been trusted to this miracle. Because so much of it did happen immediately right now for us. And figure out where you're at on what side of that. Or maybe you witnessed a miracle of a friend. Maybe you're like the disciples and you just watched it happen in somebody else's family. It's still your job to talk about it. That's the witness and the testimony that will grow people's faith. And so as you tell other people about it, it's going to grow your faith and reassure your faith, so that when the time does come and you hit the rock bottom again, you know, because you've said it and seen it with your own eyes, what God can do. Next week we're going to wrap up Maxed Out. I'm going to have another little exercise for you to do like we did at the beginning of this. We started with the water bottle and we're going to end with a little something else. But I really want you to consider that in your being maxed out? Are you hitting a limit? Because God is getting ready to entrust you with a miracle, the blessing of a miracle. What a gift that would be. What a favor that would be. And it's not just to see the abundance in your life or the healing in your life, but to see the ripple and trickle effect of those who see it and witness to it as well. Your faith and God's ability to trust you with those moments is in relation to the amount of faith you do have, and it's not about the faith you don't have. I think sometimes we think that when bad things happen to good people, it's because something went wrong. There's something we didn't know about. There's a sin we didn't catch. But I think sometimes God allows good people to get worn out so that they have to point to God and desperately run toward Him again. Because He knows in their heart and at the core of it, they are good. So He can trust them with a miracle, with favor. But He wants us to want it. He needs us to touch Him. It's not a passive thing. They were actively running toward Jesus, pushing through a crowd, not waiting on Him. So, I hope tonight you can be encouraged that being at the rock bottom or being maxed out is the perfect positioning for God to show up in a mighty way. That the gap may be growing deeper, or the hole is being dug deeper in your life. Your overwhelm is mounting as you're praying and believing for a break or for relief. Be encouraged that God is trusting you with this moment. He's not trying to see how strong you are. He's trying to see how willing you are to run towards Him. Is that your reaction? It's almost like a test, like we talked about last week with Jesus, to see if our inclination and if we have the ability and the fortitude for running toward Jesus when our flesh says to run to a bottle or to run to the mall or to run toward a drug or run to a person, but our reflex is to push through a crowd to get to our Savior. Because it's not about other people. Your faith isn't about other people. Your faith is about relationship. And so as you're being positioned, as you're being refined, as you have been put in a pit, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, know that you are in a position that may feel bleak in all physical sense, in all worldly sense, but you're in the perfect place for God to use you as a vessel. And you're a vessel for something that can break the dynamic, the generational curses, the stigmas of those around you, and bring light and love and salvation to those around you. And if you have that mindset, then you're like, man, okay, this season's hard and it sucks, and I'm not trying to diminish any of that. I don't want to make you feel like it's not valid, because if you should know anything from this, it's absolutely valid to feel how you feel, but to be present in that feeling and know it. She was in tune with her feelings now to know what it felt like. But as you are feeling those things, know that it's not going to last forever, and to know that it is not because of what you've done or what you've failed to do, but because of your faith that will prove to be the chain breaker, to be the miracle in your life. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe you need to read these passages again. Maybe you need to watch these Bible studies. But be encouraged and assured that when you're not the only one feeling this way, and that you're not the only one that's ever felt this way, but that God is with you and seeing you through all of it, that He's ready to send His angels to aid you, just as He did Jesus. But sometimes you have to get to rock bottom before you can start building the strong foundation. You have to get there. And I think we can all agree that it's worth getting there. We can't always say that in the middle of it, but I'd be willing to go to rock bottom if that meant the ability to break the chains, the yokes of my family, off of generational curses, if it meant the salvation of my child and my family. And so I just always try to remember the Lord, as you use me as a vessel, as you trust me with your miracles, give me just the strength to endure this season right now. Give me the fortitude. And give me the courage to push through the crowd, to run towards you, Lord. Even when I look crazy, even when everyone else says, go to the church, go to the church. Even when everyone says that it can't happen right now because we can't get into the church because of masks and blah, 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 regulations. It's never been about having to get to the church. It's never been about saying the right thing. It's never been about knowing the right rules and obeying them at the right time. It's always been about relationship and running toward Jesus, running after Him and believing and trusting Him in such a way. So, join me next week as we wrap this up, as we wrapped up Maxed Out. I'm going to finish in prayer. I hope you've enjoyed this study. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. That way you can get the notification when new Bible studies come up. Tomorrow I am going to be filming a little Bible study clip for this week's Advent, and those are up as well. So, thank you. And then, of course, always, now that because the group is, private, so people can't see these. That's why another reason I like being able to put them on YouTube, because you can share it with friends that may need to hear a message. Maybe they need to hear encouragement because they're hitting rock bottoms, or they're feeling desperate and overwhelmed. But they need to know that they are in the position to be a vessel for a miracle, or a witness to a miracle, and that is a powerful place to be in faith. So I will pray. Lord, thank you for tonight. Thank you for the ability to gather with my friends online. Thank you for my new friends, Lord. Thank you for blessing us with time together, for giving us a word that is transcendent through time and culture and technology. Lord, thank you for giving us an example of people of crazy faith. Lord, thank you for showing us that our Savior stands in the gap, makes time, makes room, makes space for women, that He'll stop anything for one of His daughters. Lord, on behalf of so many of your daughters tonight, I ask that you stop the chaos in their lives, the overwhelm, that you give them peace and strength and resiliency. Prepare them to be vessels for miracles, to be witnesses and storytellers of your truth and your glory, Lord. Bless us and keep us. May your face and light shine upon us. May your glory manifest in our lives so that others may see it and be drawn to your light. In your name I pray. Amen. Well, thank you guys for joining me tonight. I hope that you enjoyed this study. When I hop off here, I will wait a couple minutes just in case. I don't know how long the lag times are on these, but then I'm going to immediately take it down, and then I will upload it to YouTube so that you can catch it there. If this did resonate with you and you did enjoy it, would you consider sharing the YouTube link when I post it? that would mean a whole lot and make a big difference to our ministry and our ability to reach others and maybe help them if they're in a dark or hard place. So I will see y'all soon. Bye, friends.